Chapter 3. For I had 130,000 sheep, and of these I separated 7,000 for the clothing of orphans and widows, and of needy and sick ones. I had a herd of 800 dogs who watched my sheep, and besides these, 200 to watch my house. And I had 9 mills working for the whole city, and ships to carry goods, and I sent them into every city and in the villages, to the feeble and sick, and to those that were unfortunate. And I had 340,000 nomadic asses, and of these I set aside 500, and the offspring of these I ordered to be sold, that the proceeds be given to the poor and needy. For from all the lands the poor came to meet me. For the 4 doors of my house were open, each being in charge of a watchman who had to see whether there were any people coming asking alms, and whether they would see me sitting at one of the doors, so that they could leave through the other and take whatever they needed. I also had 30 immovable tables set at all hours for the strangers alone, and I also had 12 tables spread for the widows. And if any came asking for alms, he found food on my table to take all that he needed, and I turned nobody away to leave my door with an empty stomach. I also had 3,500 yokes of oxen, and I selected of these 500 and had them tend to the plowing. And with these I had done all the work in each field by those who would come and take charge, and the income of their crops I laid aside for the poor on their table. I also had 50 bakeries from which I set the bread to the table for the poor, and I had slaves selected for the service. There were also some strangers who saw my goodwill. They wished to serve as waiters themselves. Others, being distressed and unable to obtain a living, came with the request, saying, "We pray thee, since we can fill this office of waiters, deacons, and have no possession, have pity upon us and advance us money to us, in order that we may go into the great cities and sell merchandise. And the surplus of our profit we may give as help to the poor, and then shall we return thee thine own money." And when I heard this, I was glad that they should take this altogether from me for the husbandry of charity for the poor. And with a willing heart I gave them what they wanted, and I accept their written bond, but I would not take any other security from them except the written document. And they went abroad and gave to the time to the poor, as far as they were successful. Frequently, however, some of their goods were lost on the road or on the sea, or they would be robbed. Then they would come and say, "We pray thee, act generously toward us, in order that we may see how we can restore to you thine own." And when I heard this, I had sympathy with them, and handed to them their bond, and often, having read it before them, tore it up and released them of their debt, saying to them, "What I have consecrated for the benefit of the poor, I shall not take from you." And so I accepted nothing from my debtor. And when a man with a cheerful heart came to me, saying, "I am not in need to be compelled to he a paid worker for the poor, but I wish to serve the needy at thy table," and he consented to work, and he ate his share. So I gave him his wages nevertheless, and I went home rejoicing. And when he did not wish to take it, I forced him to do so, saying, "I know that thou art a laboring man who looks forward and waits for his wages, and thou must take it." Never did I defer paying the wages of a hireling or any other, nor keep track in my house for a single evening his hire that was due to him. Those that milked the cows and the ewes signaled to the passerby that they should take their share. For the milk flowed in such plenty that it curdled into butter on the hills, and by the roadside, and by the rocks, and the hills. The cattle lay which had given birth to their offspring. For my servants grew weary, keeping the meat of the widows and the poor, and dividing it into small pieces. For they would curse and say, "Oh, that we had of this flesh, that we could be satisfied," although I was very kind to them. I also had 6 harps, and 6 slaves to play the harps, and also a cithara, a decacord, and I struck it during the day. And I took the cithara, and the widows responded after their meals, and with the musical instrument I reminded them of God, that they should give praise to the Lord. And when my female slaves would murmur, then I took the musical instruments and played as much as they would have done for their wages, and gave them respite from their labor and sighs.